When is it time to say no? That's the question we're going to be focusing on is our theme for tonight's show, which is going to be something of a fairly informal conversation just because there hasn't been a whole lot of local news as of late. We're going to get into a lot of things today, so sit tight. If you got questions, we will get to them. So again, if you've got questions, make sure to get them into the comment section right now and before you forget them. And we will get to your Q&A as soon as we get through tonight's show, as we always do. Before we get started, just so folks know what's going on for the course of the next week, real quick, I got kicked off Twitter again. So I've got my new Twitter account in this video's description, but do remember to follow me at those other places. Follow me at Gab, Getter, Minds, all of these places that are actually free speech. If you're worried about me losing these videos, I'm doing my best to back up what I can on Odyssey. So again, my Odyssey channel is in this video's description. So go ahead and check those out. Also, yes, everything is getting backed up on Rumble. So if you're worried about the preservation of these episodes and you want to see them in posterity, that's a great place to go look too. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would love to be able to stream to Odyssey. I would love to be able to stream to Rumble. In the case of Odyssey, I have to basically beg them for permission, which they haven't given me. And in the case of Rumble, I need to pay them $25 a month to be able to live stream at all to Rumble. So for that, I would need a sponsor. So if you guys are interested in chipping in any way to cover that expense, then reach out to me and let me know. Also, for those folks that are new to this channel, I have a sister channel over at Mike Reads. It's all one word. I'll go ahead and put that link in. It's in this video's description, but I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat here for everybody so you guys can follow along there. So if you guys are interested, this is kind of a much more neutral channel, a vanilla channel, if you will. Let me bring that up so you guys can see what's going on here. So this is my Mike Reads channel, and what I do with this channel is I basically just read books, and I do book reviews, and I have conversations about literature. It's been largely economics, but there's been everything from social politics to plain research and all the way to Star Wars literature. So if that's something you guys are interested, check out that channel as well. Let me just pull up my notes again here. On that channel, which of course is backed up on Odyssey, this link is in this video's description. Thursday night, we released our Chapter 3 read of Ludwig von Mises's The Anti-Capitalistic Mentality, which could not possibly be a more timely and apt or apropos read for the time. So go ahead and check that out on my Mike Reads channel. I'll hopefully be able to get through Chapter 4 later this week. Also later this week, I have finally finished, Chapter 3 talks about the left's cancel culture, and that's all knowing that this book was written in 1956. So Ludwig von Mises basically predicted today's cancel culture as far back as 1956. Later on this week, I finally finished my piece on the character Syme from the book 1984. So that will be released later this week. Everything's edited, ready to go. Just need to upload it and get a time scheduled for that. So stay tuned on that channel. That's my Mike Reads channel. The link is in this video's description, and that will be happening later this week. Before we get into the meat of tonight's show, I do want to go over some kind of good news coming out of New Milford. So it's gonna be kind of a broken record when it comes to good news in this town, because over the weekend, the indoor track team, the New Milford High School indoor track team, won the Southwest Conference Championship. So good for them. Last week, I believe it was Thursday. I didn't get the exact date. I should know this off the top of my head. The New Milford High School wrestling team got a win over Pomperog, 48-26. What's going on? So tomorrow night, as this post shows, let me get this post up for you guys so you guys can see it better, and just go ahead and zoom in. To about there. Let's do that. So Green Wave spotted in Pomperog, seen leaving with yet another victory. Don't miss the final home meet Monday night against New Fairfield. So this was February 3rd, which was Friday. So the wrestling team was Thursday, like I said. So the wrestling team got another win on Thursday, as they are in second place. They are tied in the conference, not in the division, but in the conference with New Fairfield, who they will be wrestling Monday night. It'll be senior night, so it'll be kind of a cool show. You may actually catch me there on Monday night, depending on what the mask policy is. If there's no mask policy, then I will definitely go out of my way to make an appearance there. But this is kind of a cool thing because if they win tomorrow night, then they will have finished the season in second place behind Newtown, who only beat them 34-33. So at 1 point, which means that in the tournament, when the tournament comes around, if New Milford wins the tournament and Newtown takes, I believe, fourth or worst, which isn't very likely, but it's possible, then New Milford could actually claim the SWC title outright. So that's some cool news coming from New Milford High School sports. Some other news that's come out as of late too. Goat Days is back. I don't have the post up for you guys right now, but it will be on May 21st to May 22nd. So that was a cool thing that I went to last year and hung out with some friends, got a good chance to meet some people. So that's a cool thing. According to the AGs, more info is on its way for vendors to get booths and for participants to and for people out to know what's going to be going on in terms of the vendor availability for that weekend. As far as what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next week, well, what I'm going to be doing is actually going to be starting with Tuesday, and this is going to bring us into tonight's show. So on Tuesday night, there's going to be a public hearing for Ned Lamont's extension of emergency powers. So we're now going to be talking about the eighth consecutive abdication of legislative duty from the legislature here in Connecticut to our, I hate to call him just King Ned, but he hasn't been just strictly the executive in charge of specifically enforcing the policy of the legislative branch here in Connecticut. He has been the policy as well. He has effectively been the legislative branch now for virtually the entirety of his tenure. And he's asked for an eighth extension. Now, I'm not one to say that you shouldn't have necessarily emergency powers, but the libertarian take on this is that if you're going to extend quote-unquote emergency powers and in some ways abdicate the due responsibilities of the legislative body to a singular head in the case of the executive, I mean, I'm going to have an incredibly high bar for that. I'm going to have an incredibly high bar. There damn well better be a clear sunset date, and it damn well better actually sunset. And if it's not going to sunset, okay, maybe there's a rationale for that. But that bar goes up, right? With every extension, the bar that we need to meet for me to be okay with the, again, abdication of legislative duty to a singular person, and in this case, it's the governor, that growth isn't linear. That growth is exponential. So by the time we get even to the third or fourth request, not only should the Mongols be on the doorsteps, they should already be running roughshod over Connecticut and burning our villages. And we should be at a point where if we don't just have a king, then we don't have any way to, then we're just going to stop existing. So for me, when we get to this eighth request, then we don't have government by the consent. We don't have consent of the governed. We just don't have democracy, government by people, rule of the people by the people. We don't have that. And there is plainly no rationale for these means, right? If the end is in order to effectuate a certain legislative act or in order to effectuate some sort of policy position, then you can do that from the legislature. You can do that from the legislature. And no, you do not argue that the ends are the things that justify the means. The means justifying ends. You never argue in favor of ends justifying the means. That's just plain evil. And with that, if you're willing to take the ends as a prioristically good, then you can get to those ends via any means, which again leads you to the evils of the 20th century. So folks know, the extension of emergency powers is going to carry with it a continuation of the mask mandates in public school of children. So before we get into what that means and whether or not that's a good idea, There's going to be a public hearing on Tuesday night. Actually, is it Tuesday night? Let me pull this up. Let me get the actual details because I can't read it from OBS. Let's zoom in on this so that everybody can read it. And here, let me get this situated so that you guys can read this. Excuse me while I adjust in the middle of. So on page 3 of 5, this link that I'm going to send into the comment section right now. Let me just bring this into the comment section. Here it is on YouTube, and here it is in Facebook. Mike Boucher, New Milford Fire will be at Goat Days again this year. Mike, is that the New Milford Fire football team or the New Milford Fire department? Would love to hear back about that. So this is the agenda for the coming meetings for this week. And on page 3 of 5, continuation of emergency declarations and limited executive orders, informal hearing. That's going to be Tuesday, February 8th. So that's this Tuesday at 9 a.m. So mark your calendars. This Tuesday, February 8th at 9 a.m. The legislature will hold an informational hearing on the continuation of emergency declarations and limited executive orders on Tuesday, February 8th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. via Zoom. So you guys can do this from your homes. No need to drive in to Hartford. If you're somebody who, I don't know what your schedule is like, but if you're somebody who works, say, not exactly 9 to 5, you may be able to just do this from home outside of work. The informational hearing can be viewed via YouTube Live. In addition, the informational hearing may be recorded and broadcast live on ct-n.com. I would recommend checking out their YouTube channel, which is ct-n. And that'll be on there. It's actually pretty well done on YouTube. Individuals who wish to testify. So this is your opportunity to speak during public comment on camera, directly in real time in front of the legislative body members. Individuals who wish to testify via Zoom must register using the online testimony registration form. So folks know I have that as well. Let me bring that up for everybody. This is that Zoom sign up, and I'll put a link in this video's description to that. So let me drop the link. Here is the sign up sheet for public comment, dropping that in the comments right now. So Mike Boucher lets us know that the New Milford Fire, he's referring to the football team. Dropping that in the comments here so you guys can follow along. This is the form you will need to fill out if you want to be able to participate in what is effectively public comment during the Tuesday webinar, during the Tuesday public hearing. Let me go back to that main form so we can get through that real quick. The registration form must contain the name of the person who will be testifying. A unique email address must be provided for each person registered to speak. Registration will close Monday, February 7th at 3 p.m. So you have until tomorrow at 3 p.m. to register for this event. Speaker order of approved registrants will be listed in a randomized order and posted on the CGA website calendar under the event on Monday, February 7th at 6 p.m. So that means basically they're going to randomize the order and your name is going to get pulled out of a hat in terms of who gets to speak in what order. So pay attention, because if you're up first, you better be ready. Please email written testimony too. So if you're looking to enter written testimony because you can't make it, that's the email to send it to. Links, by the way, are all built into this PDF. So if you go into the comment section of this video right now and go to the link that I dropped in the comment section, you can go to this right now. If you guys are not watching this live, make sure to check the comment section. It's in the comment section. In Word or PDF format. The first 2 hours of the hearing are reserved for state officials. So basically what that means is that if you're a state official, you get to go first. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes of testimony. So here's what you do. When you are faced with 3 minutes of testimony, right? You get out your pad and paper, right? And pad and pencil, right? You get out your pad and pencil and you write down your thoughts. And if you prefer, you can type it out. You can type it out on Microsoft Word. One page, single-spaced, size 12 times New Roman is about a minute and a half. It's about a minute and a half for most people. If you're able to do Ben Shapiro speed, like me, you can get through it a little bit faster, but that doesn't help. So write it down and then pull out your stopwatch or your stopwatch, go to your mirror in your bathroom and practice it. Make sure it's under 3 minutes. In fact, you shouldn't be aiming for 3 minutes. You should be aiming for like 2.5, especially if they decide to just cut you short. 2.5 minutes, if you wind up getting nervous, if you wind up starting just a few seconds late, if you want to take your time as you read through your speech, you're going to need to have that padding, that 30 seconds. So write it down, write what you're going to say down, and then go into public comment. And be ready to go right away. Be ready to go right away. There's probably going to be a long list of people that are going to want to talk. So for the people behind you, be ready to just jump in and go. Not like a radio show where you're going back and forth with the host. Hey, how you doing? How you guys doing? How things today? No, just dive into it. Just dive into it. Here's what I think. Here's why. Here's what I want you guys to do. Done. Move on. And 3 minutes, by the way, goes by real quick. So stay on track. Stay on point. Write it down. Practice it. At least once, practice it. And if it's too long, you're going to have to edit it down. You're just going to have to edit it down. So about a page and a half, single space size 12, about 2 pages-ish if it's size 14. If you're typing it out. Don't know what it works out to in terms of handwriting because everybody's handwriting is completely different. But that's about what it works out to. So that's what I'll be doing for sure Tuesday morning if I have any time whatsoever. After Monday night, I'm going to try to get to the wrestling match. And then on Tuesday morning, I'm going to be making my thoughts known. Just like I'm going to be doing here tonight. Because like I said, when you have this abdication of responsibility, of this duty to you, the electorate, to you, the tax-paying citizens of the state, when you abdicate that responsibility, that's just a giant screw you. That's just a giant screw you to you, my fellow nutmeggers. So that's what I will be doing that's what I'll be doing on Tuesday morning. And of course, I've been pretty public about my thoughts on the matter when it comes to masking and vaccinating kids. I can't make my thoughts perfectly clear here on Facebook and YouTube because Facebook and YouTube have a specific editorial standard and a specific editorial guideline of what exact speech is allowed on their platform, which is why it's not a platform. It's obviously a publication. And we are not users of the platform. We are obviously voluntary, unpaid contributing authors to their publications. But again, I've kind of made my thoughts known as where I can on the matter. So one of the pushbacks you're going to get from the other side is, oh, well, vaccinations, nobody has any complaints about vaccinations when it comes to measles, mumps, and rubella. Well, when it comes to measles, especially, that's what you're going to get pushback. The pushback against vaccinating kids is for vaccinating kids against COVID-19. COVID-19 is not the measles. Otherwise, we would call them the same thing. We would just call everything the measles. We would just call everything one thing if all viruses and all infections were the same. And they're not. And I kind of evidenced that. For those that, here we go. For those that haven't seen, this is what I've been kicking around. Because I did my homework. I collected my receipts. And by the way, for YouTube, for Facebook, again, this is all according to the CDC. 400 to 500 people died of measles on average each year in the 10 years prior to the release of the measles vaccine, which was in 1963. Presumably, nearly all of them were children. We don't have the exact specifics, but when it came to historical trends with measles, virtually everyone had the measles by 15. And that's according to the CDC, almost every human being the likelihood of catching the measles under 15 was 1 prior to the vaccine. So unbelievably transmissible. And you kind of had a natural immunity that was built up just by virtue of having it in the first place, right? So you can pretty much assume that none of these 400 to 500 are adults. You can pretty much assume they're all kids because you have basically lifetime immunity once you've been in some way inoculated, either naturally or through vaccination, inoculated against measles. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the U.S. population in 1960 was roughly 179 million. So what that means is, since there are 330 million people today, 400 to 500 deaths in 1960-ish is the equivalent of between 740 to 920 childhood deaths per year today. According to the CDC, 770 children have died with COVID, because we have to call it with COVID, over the last 2 years. The measles vaccine reduced cases in the U.S. by over 90%, despite being much more transmissible than COVID-19 in 5 years, and by 3,000-fold by 2000. Not 3,000%, 3,000-fold. That's 300,000% reduction in transmission rates, and virtually eradicated the risk of death. In the year 2000, in the U.S., measles was declared, quote unquote, eliminated, all according straight out of the CDC's mouth. This is all research I did from the CDC's website. The CDC now admits the current vaccines have only a limited effect on transmission, which our very own, right here in New Milford, world-renowned epidemiologist Dr. Jeremy Levin has not only intimated this, he said it outright repeatedly, that the current vaccines only have a limited effect on transmission at this point, and that COVID will likely never be eradicated, regardless of the improvements in vaccination rates. One of these things is not like the other. So now that you have the data, now that you have the raw numbers, when somebody comes at you with, well, measles, say, okay, fine, measles, but measles is not COVID-19, and here's why. Here's undeniable proof that the mortality rate for the measles was completely off the charts for COVID-19 when it comes to kids. And when it comes to transmission, we're not even close. Even with Omicron, we're not even close to the transmission rates when it comes to measles, which is one of the most transmissible diseases major diseases at least, that we've ever run into. Again, this is all according to the CDC, right? And of course, when it comes to vaccination of kids, as well as masking, again, I have to walk on eggshells here. I have to walk on eggshells. I wish I could be streaming now to Odyssey and Rumble, because then I could tell you guys the actual truth. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to tell you guys the actual truth here on Facebook. But we've talked about this, and on YouTube, but we have talked about this. I have talked about this. I wrote a letter to the editor, which I shared on Odyssey, so let me bring that up so you guys can see that, because it is on Odyssey. Letter to the editor, there we go. This is the downloadable PDF version that you can download now. And you know what? I'll go ahead and drop that. I'll drop the link in the comments here so you guys can go ahead and download this if you want and print it out so you have the information. Let me just drop this in the comments right now. That's on Facebook, and now we're on YouTube as well. So we've gone through this, right? And what you can see let me bring this up real quick. What you can see is let's zoom in a little bit more here. Oh yeah, we can zoom in pretty far on this. So you can see, like, at the bottom of these pages, I've sources at the bottom of the page, sources at the bottom of that page, sources. It isn't like I'm making this stuff up, but I have talked about this when it comes to the cost-benefit analysis, when it comes to things like the wearing of masks, the mandatory wearing of masks of children. So what's being kicked around the legislature right now, and I don't know where that is in terms of the process. I think it's just an idea that's being kicked around right now. We haven't gotten anything on paper. Is a return of the discretion of whether or not kids are mandated to wear masks to the towns, which is the most obvious thing on earth. It's the most obvious thing on earth. They're our schools. New Milford Public Schools is New Milford Public Schools. We know what is in our best interests as a town. We know it's in the best interest of our town, and we should have absolutely no say over what Brookfield, one town south of us, what Brookfield does in their public schools. Those are their schools, not ours. Not ours, and we have no business interfering with their government and the consent that is imperative to a proper rule of their governance in Brookfield. We have no business interfering ourselves in their politics when it comes to that matter. And at least when it comes to the specific process of imposing policy upon Brookfield. So it's the most obvious thing you should be doing just from a moral standpoint. But we don't have to just make the moral argument. Because we talked about this on this show. And let me just bring up my notes here again. We've talked about this on this show. We gave an update just a couple of weeks ago on the actual data on the matter. And I'll share that in this link too. This is going to bring you right to, we did our homework. We opened up the Excel spreadsheet. We cited our sources. We talked about the real risks that are posed to children. What the actual risk from COVID-19 is to children, right? We actually talked about the numbers, and I showed them on screen. And let me just go ahead and bring this up for everybody so we can just rewatch this real quick. It's just an excerpt. Let me get this loaded up. This is on my channel on Captain Phoenix, right? So again, link is in this video's description to that channel where you can follow me there. If you're watching on Facebook, you can join in on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can join in on Facebook. Let's make this full screen. This is going to get a little bit weird. So let me get rid of, what's the background I should be getting rid of? Let me get rid of this background. That makes it a little bit easier for folks to watch. If you're under 1, with or without a vaccine, in this case it's without a vaccine because vaccines haven't been approved for this age cohort, the odds of having died with COVID-19 over the last 2 years is 1 in 41,644. In the age group of 1 to 4, it's 1 in 397,722. And in the age cohort of 5 to 14, it's 1 in 387,679. And for the total, it's 1 in 222,445. Now, the reason that these 222,000 roughly is so much smaller than the... So you guys can see right there, I have the Excel spreadsheet out. Not only did I cite my sources, I explicitly showed the work. So again, link is in this video's description. If you want to check that out, you can. Let me get rid of this real quick so I can see what's going on here. So we went through all that. I showed you the risk that your kids have of exposure before we control for things like comorbidities, before we control for things like breaking that data down to the state level here in Connecticut, before we control for things like breaking that data down to the town level here in Connecticut, before we control for factors like vaccines weren't available for some of that age cohort until May of last year. So that a lot of those deaths that are in that cohort are deaths that predated the rollout of vaccines. Now, of course, right now, it's still not even legal for certain kids to get vaccinated against COVID-19 because of their age. But let's talk about that then. Because we can go straight to the CDC. Actually, it's from the state of Connecticut. So let me drop this link in the comment section here so you guys can follow along with this. We can actually striate this. We can actually look at the COVID deaths by age group here in Connecticut. Let me pull this up for everybody so we can. COVID deaths by age. Let me turn the lawn background on. And these are your COVID deaths by age. This is from ct.gov, and the information that they're releasing here is directly from the CDC, right? What we have here is in the 0 to 19 age group is a total of 2 deaths. 0 to 19, 5 deaths. Again, we talked about this. In the age group of 0 to 17 in Connecticut, there are 732,000 people roughly. So we're probably talking about something in the area of 800,000 kids. 7 deaths in 800,000 over the course of 2 years. So remember what I showed you about the risk the risk analysis that we did just a few weeks ago. It was just 2 weeks ago, actually. We just did that. 1 in something like 400,000. 1 in something like 400,000, and that's 0 to 19, which means that some of those could actually be 19-year-olds who aren't in public schools right now. They just aren't. 1 in 400,000 is only barely more likely than getting struck by lightning. Again, we talked about this on this channel. The odds, according to the CDC, the odds of getting struck by lightning are 1 in 500,000. So you have a roughly equal chance, an effectively equal chance of getting struck by lightning to the odds of your kid dying from COVID. Of course, the reason we talk about death is because of all the reasons we've talked about. It is a goalpost. There is nothing worse than death, right? It's a clear binary. Like, it's not like a broken bone as an outcome where it could be like, well, which bone and how badly broken is it? What's the type of break that we're talking about? What's the direction of the break? Where on the length of that bone is it broken? How many times has it been broken? Was it a compound fracture? Everyone knows what death is. It's you're either dead or you're not. There's no controversy as to what death is. So that's why we use death. And of course, the most obvious and important and salient point is that all of those outcomes in between nothing and death tend to scale with death. So if you have if the odds of death are here and they move to here, then generally speaking, the odds of, let's say we're talking about death by car accident. Let's say the odds if you get into a car accident, you end up dying. If those odds are here and then something comes along like seatbelt. Are you wearing a seatbelt in that car accident? Well, if you're not wearing a seatbelt, it spreads wide open. What happens to the risk of you breaking a bone? Because breaking a bone is between you and dying. You live through it, but you break a bone. The long haulers, if you will. Well, the odds of you dying, if they double, generally speaking, we're talking about odds of serious risk of injury scaling with that death, that likelihood of death. Of course, with seatbelts, getting into a serious accident above a certain speed limit, it's not 2-to-1. But let's just say it's 2-to-1. Right? It's a lot more than 2-to-1. The point is that all of those things tend to, generally speaking, not as an absolutism, because I know that's how I'm going to get gaslit, but as a general and heuristic guideline, it's really easy to just say, instead of going through hours and hours and hours and hours in every presentation, every conversation you have about COVID-19, you can just use death because it's a pretty straightforward thing. We understand that if the odds of you dying from something are basically zero, as compared to the odds of you dying from something that's not even close to zero, like measles, we can know that one thing is significantly worse than the other. We can treat something as being significantly more deadly or significantly more dangerous because it's significantly more deadly than the other. These are the obvious reasons we go to death, because it's just a straightforward way to intimate lots of information very quickly. And of course we care most about death because it's the most severe thing. Of course it's the thing we're trying to avoid. Of course, when it comes to your kids, the most important thing you care about is death, right? Like, of course, if we're talking about adverse consequences, and if there's only one consequence that you're going to know about, like if you have a gun to your head and can only have one adverse consequence to talk about, obviously we're talking about death because we're human beings and that's how things work. We care about kids being alive more than anything else in terms of, again, risk outcomes. And by the way, risk, by definition, cannot be zero. So for anyone who says, well, if it saves one life, that's an at-all-costs approach to thing, which, besides being disgusting, is the establishment of zero risk, which is impossible. It's the same thing as establishing a condition of married bachelor. How many bachelors out there are married? None. Because the definition of bachelor is unmarried man. It's impossible to be a married bachelor, right? So I showed you those deaths. In fact, let's bring them back up real quick because we can actually dive into this just a little bit more. You'll notice that in that 0 to 9 cohort, right, the age range where social and linguistic development is the absolute most important, where if you're going to have lifelong problems with language and social development, it's happening at 0 to 9, not at 29 to 39, not at 30 to 39. Those problems are happening at 0 to 9. Kids need to see the lips move in order to properly develop language. Again, we've been through this. We've cited our sources a million times on this matter. But you'll notice in that age group, 0 to 9, in Connecticut, we're talking about 2. 2. That's the age group we're talking about. 0 to 19 includes kids who can get vaccinated. And by the way, the adults can get vaccinated, and you're adults. You can make that decision if you want to, right? If either the vaccines work or they don't, if you're going to tell me your concern with kids, with masking, is the adults who have been vaccinated, that's you saying vaccines don't work. That's you saying it, not me. That's you saying it. So if you're going to tell us that the reason we're doing this is for the adults, then the response is the adults can get vaccinated. And if they don't want to get vaccinated, that's a decision they made for themselves. That's a decision they made for themselves. They assume the consequences. Their body, their choice in that case. Because what we're concerned, your argument is we're concerned with the teachers. Okay, then the teachers, if they're worried about it, they can get vaccinated. They can get vaccinated, and if it provides the protection that it supposedly provides, they can get vaccinated, and we're done. We're not talking about it spreading to other people. We're talking about teachers specifically, and if we're talking about it then spreading to other people, those other people can get vaccinated. Vaccines can't simultaneously work and not work. It's one or the other. You can't have it both, right? Just like the scene from Casino. You can have the hammer and keep the money, or you can walk out of here with neither. You can't have both, right? So let's dive into that too, though. Let's dive into that too. So first things first. Okay, so 5 of those 7 that we're talking about, before we dive into that 2, 5 of those were from August of last year, which means that at most, since we've had these vaccine rollouts, at most of that 0 to 19 cohort, 2 of them out of what's got to be close to 800,000 over the past 6 months, 2 of them, again, 2 over the course of 6 months is basically that one in God knows however many hundreds of thousands odds that we're talking about. But in 0 to 9, it's 2 confirmed cases over the course of 2 years. And what you can do is, if we scroll down to the bottom of this page, we can go down to the bottom of this page and we can see the updates by day, right? And I'm not going to scroll all the way down to the end. Because I actually already did this for you guys. I'll make this easy for you. That first one death of those 2 in that 0 to 9 cohort, the first one happened in March of 2020, which means we're barely short of 2 years. One death in an age cohort of roughly 400,000 kids, one over the course of 2 years. Again, and by the way, I'd be willing to bet that one death in both cases were newborns. And already, again, they're newborns who we already isolate and treat differently. Before COVID came along, we already isolated newborns for however long we isolate newborns. Sorry, I don't have kids, folks. I don't know exactly what those numbers are. We already did that. Nobody objects to that. Nobody. So again, you can stop gaslighting this community here that wants to get our kids back into the schools in a way that they're actually going to learn, right? We already isolate and treat these kids differently. We already isolate and treat newborns differently. Nobody disagrees with that. Everybody is okay with newborns are especially vulnerable to viral pathogens, regardless of what the viral pathogen is. So for however many hours, you kind of have to separate them from the public, if you will. You kind of have to look at them through a glass window for a little while, right? I don't know how long that is, again, but we already do that. But one death, even if it's not a newborn, by the way, is not a school-age kid. Is not a school-age kid. We're talking about school-age kids. If it's a newborn, then it's 0. Then it's 0 in that 0 to 9 cohort of school-age kids that have died, again, with COVID over the last 2 years. But let's say it is. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's build the Steelman version of this. Let's build the most difficult case. That's 1 in over 800,000. We're looking at nearly 1 in a million odds. That's the odds we're talking about. And again, reminder, risk calculations, risk cannot, by definition, be 0. We're already talking about we've already talked about comparing that risk to other things. Falling down the stairs is something like 1,200 times more likely to kill your kids than COVID-19 at this point, than if those are the odds. We talked about how drowning is orders of magnitude more likely to kill your kid than COVID-19. Should we ban pools? I mean, I don't want to give the radicals at this point any ideas, but should we ban stairs? I mean, there are stairs on buses. There are stairs in buildings. Should we ban stairs? Choking kills you have a way higher risk of dying from choking. Again, all according to the CDC, way higher risk of dying from choking than you do from dying from COVID-19. And almost every single choking death, almost every single one, it's food that we're choking on here. So should we ban food? Should we ban food? Seriously. Because if we're going to establish a standard of 0, then when the people come back, well, won't somebody please think of the children? Then you say, well, then we should ban food because your child has a way higher risk of dying dying from choking on food than they do of dying with COVID-19. And again, we already talked about the adults. If we're going to pivot to a conversation about the adults, I don't care. It's their choice. They're adults. They can get vaccinated. I don't care. If you don't want to get vaccinated, then you're an adult. That's what my body, my choice means. And we talked about that 0 to 9 cohort it's an incredibly important developmental period, both in terms of social development and their language years. And what we have here is a situation where you have competing interests, right? So you have if the kids are forced to endlessly wear the masks, they're going to suffer tremendously from those developmental issues. We know that. Nobody is even denying that. But if your claim is that by not wearing the masks, they have the chance of contracting COVID-19, well, 1 in a jillion odds of dying from COVID-19 or whatever those consequences might be, certain odds, definitely going to have developmental issues moving forward. Multiplied by whatever weight you give that is the competing interest. Competing interests do exist. Every person I've interviewed from the proverbial other side rejects the notion that competing interests actually exist. And that's just insane. Obviously, they exist. The competing interest of serving the taxpayers by not having to gouge them with taxes, right, is a competing interest with whatever thing that they want that you would pay for with taxes. When you go to the store to buy food, you have the competing interest of having that money to spend on something else, right? Like shelter and the food. These are interests that you have, which are in direct competition when you have scarcity, which you can't avoid. And by the way, all this is before we talk about the actual effectiveness of masks, which I can't talk about. Again, we talked about this at the beginning of the show. I can't talk about it because YouTube and Facebook have editorial standard that doesn't allow me to tell you the truth. It doesn't allow me to tell you what exactly 2 years ago, not just the consensus, what was universally adopted as true by the totality of not only the scientific community, but the totality of every institution you will ever have run into was in unanimous agreement about the effectiveness of masks in preventing the transmission of viral pathogens. And when I say masks, the 3 masks that are circulating right now: surgical masks, N95s, and cloth masks. They're unanimous. It was a unanimous position. Every iota of research was in agreement on this matter. Every iota of institutional authority on this matter was in universal agreement on this matter. Again, licensed commercial pesticide operator for decades across a multitude of states. I have to know this information. I have to sit through these boring lectures and seminars and take a massive battery of tests when it comes to PPE. I'm the one who knows. I'm the one who's actually read this research, and I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. I can't tell you what was the unanimous position of every institution on earth 2 years ago today because of the editorial standards here on Facebook and YouTube. And this all segues quite naturally into the main theme of tonight's show, which is saying no. This is one of the most difficult lessons in life that people have to learn, and you have to learn it. You have a mandate to learn this sort of thing if you're going to ever develop. If you're ever going to improve your station in life, there is a skill you have to learn, which is knowing when and how to say no. Most people who have kids are basically forced to learn this, to learn how to tell their kid no. A 2-year-old, you don't sugarcoat. You just say no. There's no dancing around the issue. And if you ask your 4-year-old, if you just say, what do you want to have for dinner tonight? And you just serve whatever they want to have for dinner tonight, it's going to be, pizza, cake, and ice cream for eternity. That's all they're going to be eating. And you know as a parent, you are derelict in your duties if you do that. Derelict in your duties as a parent if you're going to be doing that. Most of us as employees have at some point told our boss no. Almost everybody quits their job, and that's you telling your boss, no, I'm not going to do this sort of thing. There is a point where your boss is going to lay down something on you. Like, I get it. He's your boss. And it's a position of authority that you have to accept. If you ever want to improve your station in life, you do have to also accept that your boss is your boss, but there's a line to be drawn. There's a line to be drawn of something that you just won't do, right? Like, let's say your boss tells you, here's a chainsaw, go up into that tree with no ropes. No, I'm just not doing that. Even if it's legal, even if it's somehow legal, there is a line to be drawn, and everybody learns that. Everybody learns at some point, I'm not coming into work tomorrow. I'm just not. Because I quit. Everybody has learned at some point, too, to tell their friends no. When it comes to peer pressure, of course, at some point as an adult, you do have to say, just no. And it could be just a matter of, hey, man, you want to go fishing today? Oh, well, yeah, man, I'd love to go fishing, but I've got these other things I've got to do, so no. I'm going to tell my friends no. Hey, man, I need help moving today. Well, it would be virtuous for you to help your friends move. Also, my wife's about to go into labor, so no, right? Where the lesson gets lost is in business and in politics. And this kind of gives me an opportunity to plug my series in philosophical concepts. So if you guys go to that channel, let me bring this up real quick. Let me bring up my channel. I have a series on my channel called Philosophical Concepts. Let me bring that up. It's a playlist that I've put together, and I'll be continuing with of philosophical concepts. So I'll put this playlist link in the comments section. Guys, check it out. It's something you guys I think if you're into philosophy, you'll really appreciate. Keith, thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for everybody who's watching on YouTube and on Facebook. Keith says the mask should never have been a thing in the first place. Well, if you actually go by the scientific consensus prior to, again, not even consensus, unanimous position. Well, Keith, I think you might be happy. Is the closest thing I can say is if we went by that standard, you would probably be happy. And that's the most I can say on that matter until we can start streaming onto Rumble and Facebook. But just drop the link in the comments here, both on Facebook and YouTube. Check out the series. It's something you guys are really going to appreciate. In business, there's the concept of, all right, so before we get into this, the reason I shared that link is because this will help in that series, I talk a lot about good faith, and I talk about what it means to be acting in good faith, and I talk about a lot about what it means to be acting in bad faith. So if you don't understand those concepts, do check out my series in philosophical concepts. I will probably have to just have a video set aside specifically for good and bad faith in general. But the idea is, in business, the slogan, the customer is always right, is not an absolutism, and it should not actually be taken as an absolutism. If you want to run your business into the ground, that's a great way to do it. And there's a clear stopping point. Right? I actually had a boss years ago that said outright, always say yes. Always tell the customer yes. This is how you hang yourself. This is how you allow the lynch mob to hang you. And for the record, the line is drawn by the phrase, never kowtow to belligerence. So for any of you who are interested, I'd love to tell my story. Let's see what time we have left. I don't have much time. So do Google my name, Mike Sennello, and then the word groundhog or woodchuck. In 2000, I think it was 15. Yeah, I think it was 2015. I was superintendent and head groundskeeper in New Milford Center Cemetery, 84-acre cemetery, 10,000 occupants or so, 9 to 10,000 occupants, 10,000 or so stones. We had a groundhog problem, and the traps weren't working. We're not going into the traps. So I went to preposterous standards to try to get rid of these woodchucks and eradicate this problem. I tried just filling it in the holes. I tried filling them in with stones. I tried just pouring more cement. I tried just saying, screw it, we'll just have to fix these stones as we move forward. Nothing was solving this problem. So I contacted DEEP. Yes, folks, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I said, nothing seems to be working to get rid of these woodchucks. What should I do? And their answer was, shoot them. I wasn't expecting that out of deep, to be honest. And I said, well, I mean, okay, like, if we have to resort to that, what do you have to do? And they went through the whole rigmarole of what I should be doing. Here's a list of guys you can legally hire. If you don't pay somebody, you can bring on anyone who's a licensed hunter. There is no hunting season. There is no trapping or hunting limits on these things. These things are a specially classified pest because of how much of a problem they are in this state. Massive overpopulation problems. They are just a pest. Kill as many of them as you want. In fact, kill as many of them as you can is what they basically told me. And I said, all right, well, if we don't have to resort to that, I'm going to continue trying the traps and stuff and catch and release. And they said, whoa. If you catch one, do not release it. Again, this is deep. Department of Energy and Environmental Protection said, do not catch and release anywhere. Don't release them anywhere because they'll just overpopulate wherever you're moving them to, and then overpopulation will spread right back into where you started from in the first place. So don't do that. Kill them. Well, what do? Oh, well, when you get him in a cage, you're at point blank. Put the rifle against his head. Kill him. All right. Well, if I don't want to do that, like if I don't have a rifle, if I don't have a firearm, and I have a hard time with that, how else would I go about that? And they said, oh, well, carbon monoxide poisoning. I was like, well, carbon monoxide poisoning. How do I even do that? And they were like, well, you have a truck, right? And I was like, oh God, I know where this is going. And that truck has a tailpipe, right? Okay. So get a sack, wrap it, like make it an airtight seal around the cage, hook the tailpipe up to the sack, and they'll die. They'll go to sleep. It's a painless death apparently, and they just go to sleep. And you just let it run for a while. They just go to sleep and they're dead. And then you throw the carcass out in the woods, right? This is deep. So I contacted, our mayor. I contacted the local police department. I put out notifications on social media. I put out giant signs everywhere saying on this date, do not come to the cemetery. We're closing the cemetery to try to get rid of these groundhogs. We're going to try to bring in a volunteer hunter, licensed hunter, one guy. We're going to have I'm going to be the guy that's going to be sitting right next to him as he does all of this to make sure everything's hunky-dory, right? Do not come. And then the environmental community lost their absolute minds. Our phones were ringing off the hook, and the demands that were coming from the public, and not even from New Milford residents, from people from many states away, in some cases from international phone calls, were calling for my head, honestly. And you know what? At a certain point, we had to say, you know what? We're just not even answering these calls. We're not returning these phone calls. We're not returning these emails. We've been bombarded to a point where we've had to disconnect the phone and then just give out my personal cell phone number to the local funeral homes in case we have a funeral, right? And that's it. Just, all the guys in town, here, you got my cell phone number. If you got a funeral, call me. Don't call the office because I'd come in the morning and there would be genuinely 99 voicemails in the morning. 99. When I say ringing off the hook, I mean, I would get off the phone, hang up, and it would immediately start ringing. That's what I'm talking about. So what we have is belligerence. And the demands they were making were utterly ridiculous. And in this case, that those demands are being made in bad faith. They're being mad in bad faith. When somebody demands, say, an apology, and that apology is going to get you nothing in response, that they're not going to say, okay, thank you for that apology, moving on. They're not going to do that. If they're calling for your head, this is in bad faith. It's tough for me to say exactly when that's the case, but you don't kowtow to belligerence. And for the record, you owe your combatants nothing. If they're going to just be antagonistic combatants, you never surrender to someone who isn't going to show you mercy. You either die in combat or you die in surrender. If they're just, when they capture you, if they're just going to cut off your head anyway, if they're just going to immediately put a bullet in your brain and they're combatants on the battlefield, then you don't surrender to them, ever. If they say, surrender and we'll end this violence, and they're not going to, then it's in bad faith. And you don't surrender to them. Which means if you did nothing wrong, in this case, you do not apologize. If you do nothing wrong in a bunch of zombies, right, make bad faith demands, you have a duty to reject them, right? When the zombie apocalypse comes around, they're just brains. They're out to kill you no matter what. There's no leveling with them. There's no compromise. There's no dialogue to be had with the zombies in the zombie apocalypse. So again, if you do nothing wrong and a bunch of zombies make bad faith demands, you have a duty to reject those demands. Joe Rogan, who's big in the news right now, absolutely should not apologize to the woke mob because you know their demands are coming in bad faith. The Freedom Convoy that's happening in Canada right now, do not give in to the demands of the left when you know what those demands are based on, which is a double standard. You know that when Antifa and BLM were burning down whole cities and murdering innocent people by the dozen, you know what their response was. It wasn't just, nothing to see here. It was openly encouraging that explicit violence. So in the case of the Freedom Convoy, you owe the double standard nothing. And this kind of segues naturally into politics. And this question of where is the line? At what point and in what way do you say no? Of course, in the world of business, when a client comes in and makes a ridiculous demand, a genuinely preposterous demand. I go into the hardware store, I want all of your lumber for free. Well, no, you can't do that. Again, you have to say no in that situation. And on top of that, okay, in a business environment, there's a way to say, we don't do that. We don't sell our lumber for free. There's a price associated with that lumber. Happy to continue to have you as a client if you're willing to pay that price. That's what the story is, period. And you don't back down. And if they get belligerent, you can say, listen, I don't want to have to do this. You're on private property. You can either pay the price and we're happy to sell you the lumber, or you can move on. And if you're unwilling to move on, then we will have to call the police, right? And this notion of not only when to say no, but how to say no, the most difficult place to apply that lesson is in politics. I know there are certain policy prescriptions which may actually be caustic in certain environments. But if your political opponents are coming from a position of bad faith, if the demands are being made in bad faith, then don't adhere to them. Then you have a duty to say no. And this is actually a question I asked Eric Hansel when he was running for Board of Education last year. And I asked him the question directly about disobeying the state when it comes to things. I asked him where this line was, and his response was actually somewhat excellent in the way he responded. And quite honestly, Eric Hansel has been great on the Board of Education here in New Milford. So Eric, if you're watching, man, keep it up. Keep it up. Keep saying those things that need to be said. Your position is the correct position on this matter. You have my support, and you have the support of the voters who elected you in a landslide. So again, I had this interview with Eric during his campaign. I'll share the whole interview in the comment section now so you guys can check into that. So just sharing this in YouTube and sharing this on Facebook so you guys can see this. Eric at least agrees that there is a line to be drawn. Let's bring up that clip from Eric Hansel. It'll be just about a minute. What would be a type of executive order where you would think would be worth having the Board of Ed stand up to it and say, we're not doing this?
Our hands are tied by the law. I would say the masking already crossed that line. However, we're bound by law to do so.
Well, at the same time, let me take this to a hyperbolic extreme. So okay. if we were talking about straight up boxcars, at that point, I would assume that if we're talking about boxcarring children, as the proverbially boxcarring children, there would be a line that where someone would say, whoa, we want to be on the right side of history. We're not enforcing that. Yeah, exactly. What would be an example? Where is the line is basically what I'm getting to. What is the line where you would say as a board member, we need to stand up against this?
Wow. That's a powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
And it's got quite an allegorical context I I can't wrap my head even around what they've done so far with the masking and the plastic dividers. From a I don't want to get technical on a statistical standpoint and everything, or even from entropy theory and how particles travel through space. I'd put your whole audience to sleep in a heartbeat. But
well, you and I can have that conversation ourselves sometime then.
This whole thing makes about as much sense to me as pushing on a rope. I'm.
So there you have it, folks. Eric Hansel, good on you. Here's a Board of Education member that's willing to say the thing that makes sense, which at the very least is that there is a line to be drawn. And he's kind of given at least a vague idea as to where that line is, and he's kind of on board with where my line is, to be honest. At least Eric Hansel agrees that there is a line to be drawn. And to the folks that are going to say that, one of the other things that the opposition is going to bring up is this ridiculous argument of you can't talk about the boxcars until you're already on one, right? This is insane. Because if you're only going to talk about the boxcar, you're only allowed to talk about the boxcars when you're already on one, it's too late. It's too late. When you talk about what happened in the 1930s in Germany, you talk about how it got to that point. And it didn't go from 0 to gas chambers. There were steps along the way, right? And everyone agrees that there was a clear line that happened basically at the putsch, in the Munich putsch, I think it was 1933. That's where things stop. Everything after that, no, you got to fight that. You have to actually stand up to that. You have to actually point the finger and say, this is insane. This is evil, and we're not going to stand up to it. No. Right? And the line can be drawn to say no, of course, before you're already on the boxcar. You can bring up a problem that is a problem of what happens if. You can absolutely say, although this hasn't happened yet, this policy you're prescribing allows for this very serious problem to arise. So no. Last week we talked about the Chernisky Road Bridge project. And we spent an entire episode on the Chernisky Road Bridge project last Monday. And this is the most serious case of give them an inch and they will take a mile. Give them 10 minutes and they're going to delay this project for years. Give them $1,000 and they're going to turn this project, which we could have done for barely more than $500,000. We're talking about $600,000, and now it's looking like it's going to be millions. At some point, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease argument has to just stop. It just has to stop. I talked about how this is 4 or 5, maybe 6, at most 7 people that are making what has become completely ridiculous demands. Right? If you're going to just have squeakiest wheel gets the grease, if that's going to be the argument, then that's just the most obnoxious person in the room wins, which reduces itself, of course, to might makes right, which is evil, which is just an evil way to do things. So at some point, when it comes to the most obnoxious person in the room, you got to just say no. You've got to just say a demand is not going to be met, period. And when it comes to environment, would you be willing for the people who are saying that going from a dual box culvert system to a single box, or from a dual box to an open system, right? We're going from this to this. That's splitting a hair. That's the absolute splitting of a hair, and we're talking about exploding the price of the project. And if you're willing to just say, well, environment, to those who are willing to say that, well, I welcome you to explain how you're totally okay with this project exploding to $8 quintillion, to several Death Stars. More productivity represented in form of currency than has ever existed in all of human history. All of it combined, we're willing to spend on making a bridge go from this to this. Sorry, this. From this to this. That $8 quintillion, we're totally willing to do that. Would you be willing to kill someone over this type of claim? If we're going to take this to its logical end, if environment is an actual intrinsic concern, if it has an intrinsic value, then you do have to take these things to the logical end. Because if you don't, then they're going to take it to its logical end. If you don't ask this question, then what is stopping the thing from saying, no, we're going to sacrifice human beings for this? How many people would you be willing to murder in the name of the environment? At some point, a line must be drawn. Of course, if you actually act on principle, then that line is already drawn because you have a limiting principle if you're actually acting on principle. At some point, you have to just do what is right, regardless of the pushback that you're going to run into. And, I'll say hot take. Tech environment doesn't have value intrinsic. Its value is extrinsic, and I'm happy to invite anyone on to talk about. We'll have to talk about that another time, but I'm happy to welcome anyone who wants to debate on that matter. When it comes to parking passes here in New Milford, again, we already have this problem solved. This is a non-problem. We already have this program. If seniors can't afford it, they call up social services, and apparently no questions asked, boom, you get your free pass. So we already have this problem resolved. If you can't afford it, then you pay. Well, we should show as a sign of integrity. Again, we have this. We have this. Again, if it's just something virtuous to give away the thing for free, well, then why wouldn't it be virtuous to give away everything for free? Why stop at parking passes? Why stop at the seniors? Why not just give everyone? Why not just take everything so we can give everything? Why not just institute Maoist communism? Again, I'm taking these ideas to their logical end because you have to. In order to engage in good faith, you have to think about what these ideas will necessarily lend to if there is no limiting principle. And if you're not acting on principle, then there is no limiting principle. And if you're not acting on principle, you're almost certainly acting in bad faith. And quite frankly, when it comes to the parking passes, why are we talking about spending money on something that's already been budgetarily accounted for? Again, a non-issue. This isn't even an issue. This isn't even a problem that needs to be resolved. We already give away these passes to seniors for free for the ones that so much as pick up a telephone. At some point, it's going to be time to just say no. And this is an extremely difficult lesson to learn, and it's an extremely difficult lesson to put into practice. But at some point, you have to just accept that you never kowtow to belligerence. So we're just about past 8 o'clock. I think I've kind of covered this idea as thoroughly as I possibly can. So we're going to dive into Q&A in just a second here. So if you guys have questions, comments that you want to put into the comment section, get them in now because we're going to be talking about that soon. Just as a reminder so everybody knows, on my Mike Reed's channel later this week, I will be getting, we just finished Chapter 3 in Ludwig von Mises' Anti-Capitalist Mentality, which you guys should definitely look into. Chapter 3 talks about cancel culture. Reminder, book was written in 1956, so I thought it was kind of something of a timely read for this. We'll be getting to Chapter 4 and hopefully Chapter 5 by the end of the week. Probably not Chapter 5 by the end of the week, but we're going to be doing that. I did finally finish my special video on the character of Syme from Orwell's 1984, which you guys are really going to love, especially the crowd that is on board with me when it comes to masking of children in schools. You guys are really going to like that video. So check out that channel. Link is in this video's description. Again, tomorrow night, New Milford High School is taking on, the Milford High School wrestling team is having senior night. They're taking on, New Fairfield. I don't have a time for that yet. I'm sure you can look that up. So that's where I'll be on tomorrow night. Tuesday morning, again, you have to get, if you want to participate in public comment at the public hearing, that's going to be happening at 9 a.m. Tuesday morning. You have to fill out that form. By tomorrow night at 6, shared it in the comment section. So look for that link in the comment section. Remember, if you want to participate in that public hearing, you have to fill out that form. And if you want any hope of some sort of policy change, you have to let people know that you want this policy change. I'm kind of black-pilled on all this, so I don't know how much it's actually going to do. Remember, you get 3 minutes to speak. Write it down, practice it, time it, stick to it. Stay on topic, stay on target, and then we'll see you hopefully Tuesday morning. Next week, we talked is going to be the Super Bowl. I'm not competing with the Super Bowl. I'm just not going to have a show next week. Some people have talked to me about doing a quickie something special, some sort of special during halftime. Let me know in the comment section if you think that's something you guys want me to do. And if you do, let me know what your ideas are for what I should do for halftime. If I don't get any sort of feedback on what can be done in about 15 minutes, because really that's all that the time we're going to have here. By the time we get everything loaded up, shared, and get shut down, that's all that we're really going to have in terms of halftime. So probably not going to be a show next week. Next week is Super Bowl Sunday. And the Monday after that, I'm pretty sure is a town council meeting. Yeah, Monday after that's a town council meeting. So that's what's coming. That's going to be in store for me on this channel and IRL. So look out for that. So let's get into your comments here. Let me open up. Let's go to YouTube first. Okay, so we got to Keith's comments on YouTube. Keith, thanks for checking me out on YouTube. Let's go into Facebook. I think we've got through all the comments on Facebook. Seems like it was a bit of a quiet night tonight. Yeah, looks like we got through all of those comments. Hey, Rick and Lisa AJ, if you guys wind up seeing this, let me know as soon as you get the information out for the vendors, because I've got a few vendors in mind that I'm participating with. So for GOAT Days, which of course is an acronym for Greatest of All Towns, which this town of New Milford is. It's a shame that it's in Connecticut, but do love my town. So we will see you guys, not next week, but I gave you guys the schedule, so we will see you around. So thanks everybody, genuinely thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you have the information you need now too, moving forward for whatever those endeavors are for the course of your next week or so, and we'll see you in the next one. Again, thanks for tuning in everyone. Good night.